So, what you're telling me is that while we can draw some high level parallels between AWS IAM and on prem Active Directory, outside of the user context, that's where it gets much more complex in AWS because you're provisioning access not just to files and folders, but to network resources, infrastructure, workloads, and a much broader array in the AWS environment. Hey, Ryan. I know we started off talking about some of the AWS services at a high level. Let's dive into the IAM service there. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. Killian, IAM is, I think of it kind of similar to like almost Active Directory on-prem or one of your classic directory services that you might use to, manage users, manage groups. Essentially, you're managing access as well. But, in the AWS space, like we mentioned last time, you're essentially almost creating an entire network. So you have the ability to create things like IAM users or, local identities. You can also have IAM roles that can be used to, gain access from like federated users to things like workloads running in AWS. And then from there, you can start to define access, who can access what through a combination of policies that are set up.
So, kind of drawing that parallel out a little bit further, in the on-prem world, as you mentioned, typically AD users and groups would be provisioned onto ACLs to grant access to files or folders at that point. How does that differ in the AWS world? What are you granting access to there with the IAM users?
Yeah, it's a little bit more complex. It's not just files and folders and shared drives anymore. We're talking about things like infrastructure objects, workloads, functions, even network segments within, the broader AWS account and, tangential areas of the network as well. So it's very, very complicated. And, I think there's a lot of benefit to that because you have a lot of granularity around the controls that you can design. But at the same time, it can also get quite complex in that regard too. Things like microsegmentation, and as you have multiple folks making changes within the environment, sometimes it's very easy to block off access maybe where you shouldn't have, or in some cases maybe overexpose access where we shouldn't have either.
That makes a ton of sense. So, what you're telling me is that while we can draw some high level parallels between AWS IAM and on prem Active Directory, outside of the user context, that's where it gets much more complex in AWS because you're provisioning access not just to files and folders, but to network resources, infrastructure, workloads, and a much broader array in the AWS environment.
Spot on.
Awesome. Thank you.